Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. We are glad to be with you because there is plenty of news to cover while the rest of the country seems to be in a series of arm wrestling matches that you'll forgive me if I find a little less interesting. There have been a few major investigations and findings on the matter of fraud here in the United States that are getting results. And this all comes down to the President of the United States officially nominating acting Attorney General Todd Blanche for the next Attorney General position. And the reason that this matters is that a lot of Americans went into the 2026 year asking for results. In fact, a lot of Americans have been asking for arrests, for prosecutions, for indictments on a number of things that have been in the public eye, but maybe haven't been acted on outside of some very angry and spicy words from committees in the House and the Senate. And Todd Blanche stepped up to the plate after Pam Bondi was wished a fond farewell by Donald J. Trump, and stepped up to do a couple of things, directly answering, in fact, a call for arrests. Here was a clip from 2 days ago on June the 6th on Fox from Todd Blanche articulating what it is that he is trying to actually do with his time as the Attorney General. Again, right before midterms, this matters quite a bit. Here you go.
We saw you in a whole of government approach this week tackling fraud. And I've heard from our viewers constantly, we want to rest. And you brought that once again this week, a 32-count indictment, 2 of which were state employees. This is the most wanted fraudsters you have. I was stunned, Mr. Attorney General, that there is a man on there that's accused of stealing $1.2 billion with the B of taxpayer dollars. These people, you think you're going to find them?
Oh, wait, well, what's that? You haven't heard all of the news on these particular list of fraudsters? There are, in fact, case upon case after case after case of individuals, some of whom were born here in the United States, some of whom came over as immigrants and were illegal immigrants, some of whom were brought over via various H-1B visa programs, some on student visa programs and just decided to stay forever ad nauseum, amen. There are numbers, a $1.2 billion fraud allegation in theft. A couple of years ago, not even a decade or a decade and a half ago, a couple of years ago, this would have been front page news around the entire country. And yet, here and now, this is just one of the many fraud cases that involve your tax dollars that the Department of Justice is going after.
Well, yes, and that's one of the reasons why we're publishing this list, is because it works for the most wanted. Director Patel talks about how in just 1 year we've gotten 8 of the 10 most wanted criminals, and that's why we wanted to start this list. You have President Trump, Vice President Vance telling the American people we are going to stop this fraud and this thieves, they're just people stealing money from the taxpayers of this country, and we announced a bunch of charges in Ohio this week, and just remember, when we're arresting these guys, we're taking cars, luxury cars. We got Range Rovers, Maseratis, a McLaren this week. And so these are individuals who are just stealing from us and then going out and living in the lap of luxury. And so we are going to continue in every jurisdiction to go after these fraudsters and arrest them and take all of their ill-gotten gains, which is what you saw happen this week.
Now, I see a comment right now. I see the comment section, justifiably so, saying, hey, look, I'm tired of everybody talking about we found fraud, but nobody's going to jail. Where is the accountability? I want to see somebody go to jail. That is exactly what Todd Blanche is doing. We are seeing more convictions, more jail sentences, and yes, even finally, individuals who are getting their citizenship in the United States stripped. They are being denaturalized. The Department of Justice has filed denaturalization actions in various U.S. district courts against 17 individuals so far, accused of serious offenses. CBS and Reuters call this the greatest targeting of individuals to have their citizenship revoked of any presidential administration in history. According to the DOJ, quote, when criminal aliens exploit the naturalization process by breaking the law, there are consequences. Criminal aliens are lying about their past crimes, including drug dealers, sexual predators, and fraudsters. Gaining U.S. citizenship is a privilege, and under the steadfast leadership of President Trump, this Department of Justice maintains a zero-tolerance policy for the abuse of this process, said Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. Quote, we continue to work around the clock with our interagency partners to make sure U.S. citizenship is granted to those who truly deserve it. Now, you can say, well, that's really great, but how do we actually know that this DOJ is going through with getting some of these individuals off the street and in this case, actually out of the country? And the answer to that question is the left is fighting mad over the Todd Blanche being given the nod to be the next Attorney General of the United States. Now, Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley makes it perfectly clear that this is along the lines of what a lot of Americans are asking for. He said, quote, "Today the Senate received President Trump's nomination of Todd Blanche to be the United States Attorney General, maintaining the Department of Justice ability to protect Americans from crime and hold criminals accountable is essential for the safety of American families." And it's appearing to be essential for the financial stability of Americans as well. Since the number of H-1B visas has started going down, since the targeting of H-1B visa fraud and misuse has been ramped up in the country, especially in the southern United States, in cities like Dallas, Texas, the cost of housing is going down because there are fewer individuals who are being imported to buy housing instead of American citizens getting those pieces of property. He says, quote, "Blanche is well qualified and has shown his dedication to restoring law and order across the country. The Senate Judiciary Committee's work to process Blanche nomination is underway." And this has all of the major, by the way, if you want to know what tomorrow's news is going to look like, the freak out over Todd Blanche is about to begin. I mean, you thought that Brett Kavanaugh was dragged through the mud. Get ready for part two. And you can tell because John Oliver is already losing his mind. One of the left-wing hosts who you kind of thought was like somehow less funny and slightly more British Stephen Colbert. Here you go.
Trump announced he'd nominate Todd Blanche, his former lawyer, for Attorney General, a man whose impartiality is probably best summed up by these remarks he made after being named acting AG last month.
I love working for President Trump. It's the greatest honor of a lifetime. And if President Trump chooses to keep me as acting, that's an honor. If he chooses to nominate me, that's an honor. If he chooses to nominate somebody else and I go back to being the DAG, that's an honor. If he chooses to nominate somebody else and asks me to go do something else, I will say, thank you very much. I love you, sir.
People are all upset. Oh, how could he just say, you know, it's an honor to be nominated. Thanks. If I get the nomination, great. It wasn't set in stone that he was going to be nominated officially as the Attorney General of the United States. Lee Zeldin's name had been floated around. We had other individuals from both inside the Department of Justice, like Harmeet Dillon, the Assistant Attorney General, who focuses on the Civil Rights Division. We had outside lawyers and legal minds. We had senators and representatives who were suggested for the position. And this is what's freaking him out, is because he says that he is friendly to the President of the United States. And John Oliver is going to make a lot of hay about this. That's not quite working. Some of you might remember, of course, because the glass on this was shattered ages ago. And it was shattered ages ago, not because Merrick Garland used to spend his time licking Joe Biden's feet, but because Eric Holder announced he was Barack Obama's wingman and did so proudly, and then worked with Barack Obama to institute legal practices with all of the air quotes intended, for Barack Obama to then use the Internal Revenue Service to target Christian, both Protestant and Catholic organizations and charities and nonprofits.
Jesus, Todd? There is sucking up and there's whatever that was. It sounds like...
Now, keep in mind, again, all of the freakouts get a little better because right now on the floor of the Senate, we have Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois. Dick Durbin of Illinois, who's losing his mind because he's suggesting this House is going to be framed, just giving you kind of the update earlier on in the week. This entire argument as to why Todd Blanche can't possibly be the Attorney General is that he's super, ooper, duper anti-immigrant. And what you're going to see is a lot of gaslighting. You're already seeing it. It's going to get worse. The gaslighting goes like this. You and I have seen, and we're going to go through them here in a minute, the case after case after case after all of this time. Well, hesto presto, they are actually getting all of these kinds of immigration fundings. They are actually getting all of these various sorts of magical monies from Medicare and Medicaid. They just have to steal them to get them. Radio crew, we're going to send you over to the commercial side. We're going to continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Sorry to those on the live stream side. It appears that YouTube gave y'all the boot for a second, but we will press on because this is far too important to back up and go over again. So in the meantime, while Todd Blanche is being lambasted as the ultimate evil, and I'm serious, he is being considered the awful person, you're being gaslit. You're being gaslit by this manner. all of the fraud that has been recognized by immigrants, both legal and illegal, who have come into the country, that kind of fraud is then being used, or excuse me, is being swept under the rug by people just talking about immigrants in general. So for example, those on the left love to say, well, we're a nation of immigrants, which means that all immigrants are coming here for a better life. Dick Durbin of Illinois was on the floor of the Senate this afternoon, whining and complaining for the better part of a half an hour in this very manner. Here you go.
Come to this issue with a personal agenda. My mother was an immigrant to this country. She was brought here at the age of 2. Hers was a poor family from Lithuania that came to the land of opportunity, East St. Louis, Illinois, where I was born and raised. My grandfather worked jobs that required manual labor, as immigrants do. They took jobs other people wouldn't consider. And here, the next generation produces a grandson who was elected to the United States Senate. That's my story. That's my family's story. That's America's story.
Do you see the equation there? So the argument is that, well, my grandparents came over from Lithuania. Were they given any kind of federal aid, or were they given any kind of little housing or daycare subsidies, or special employment subsidies, or special visas just for them? No, they were not. Were American companies allowed to go to foreign lands and solicit specifically special kinds of employment favors and waivers and everything else, but without going to Americans first? Nope. Immigrants came over to this country and had to compete alongside Americans for those jobs. Now he says, well, Americans wouldn't do these jobs. In fact, Irish immigrants and Italian immigrants and other various kinds of Eastern European immigrants, all the way from the Poles up to the Lithuanians and Estonians and Latvians, when they came over to this country, they had to learn the language and assimilate so that they could be hired instead of the other American here already who was applying for the position. It encouraged, it demanded assimilation. But you see him say, well, all immigrants, all American immigrants built America. This weird wave of immigration where people come to the country, and then again, as we've seen in the United States, as we've seen in the UK, as we have seen in France, in Germany, in Switzerland, in Sweden, all the way down to some Central American companies, the immigration group that participates in the most federal aid programs is immigrants from Somalia, are immigrants from Somalia. And it continues down that third worlder immigration lift. But as you can see from Durbin here, he's saying we shouldn't go with Todd Blanche because Todd Blanche is going to get rid of all immigrants together. This is the same argument that was made during the COVID pandemic. Donald Trump said the Wuhan virus, the China virus, they're sending it over. They were the legacy media here in the country and Democrats in the party were making the case that Donald Trump, by saying that the government of China had perpetuated this evil through the COVID-19 bioweapon, was suggesting that, oh, actually Trump's saying that all Asians are awful or some nonsense. In the same way that when Trump says that the Iranian regime is evil, he actually means all Iranians are. This kind of thing isn't going to work. But nevertheless, they are trying as hard as they can. And not just on the congressional side, but in the federal judicial side as well. So federal U.S. District Judge Leo Sorokin in Boston issued a ruling this afternoon that blocked President Trump's new requirement of a $100,000 application fee for H-1B visas. The Trump administration said if all of these big companies and corporations are going to say it's cheaper to go to India, make a job posting, and import people to the United States, rather than to hire Americans here, we have case after case after case documented of individuals who went to apply to a job at a company and found out through the HR process, the company had first spent months trying to get foreigners from Eastern Europe, from Southeast Central Asia, to apply for the job first. We got to bring the radio crew back in. Don't go anywhere. Tons more to cover tonight. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. A federal judge in Boston, U.S. District Judge Leo Sorokin, has just issued a ruling in a lawsuit that was filed by 20 Democratic state attorneys general. Meaning this, that the president, the executive branch said, if we are going to grant H-1B visas, which, by the way, are granted by the State Department. They're granted by the State Department. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, has the authority over who gets visas. You know what? If Rubio wanted to snap his fingers tomorrow and end the granting of visas for a number of reasons, he doesn't even have to come up with an economic or a national security reason. The State Department gets to decide who should be here and who should not. That is an authority granted to it in the United States Constitution. Again, the reason the State Department and the Treasury Department are considered the left and right hand of the President of the United States, it is quite literally in the first presidential administration ever, far more than anyone ever cared about John Adams, because the Vice President matters doodly squat. The very first decision that George Washington made was whether to assign Alexander Hamilton or Thomas Jefferson to the Secretary of State or the Secretary of the Treasury, respectively, because the Secretary of State is essentially the will of the president communicated across the globe. And Marco Rubio, at any point in time, could decide he's not handing out visas today. No thanks. Sorry, we're closed. Absolutely not. Come back later. And now a federal judge in Boston, of course, U.S. District Judge Leo Sorokin, has now issued a ruling in a major lawsuit against 20 blue state, Democrat state attorneys general. What was their argument? Well, Trump can't charge $100,000 per H-1B visa. Why? Because if there's a company, let's pick a random one, let's say Dell, known for their American customer service. James from Connecticut, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So if Dell says, hey, we need to hire some more software engineers, and instead of posting a software engineer job fair at California, Silicon Valley, universities, going up to Purdue University or Rutgers, going to various engineering schools in the country, for example, at the United States Military Academy at West Point, an engineering school, and saying, hey, we need software engineers. We're going to work with you Americans to give you the position. Or going to various trade schools that often include information technology, IT development courses now. Instead, Dell and other countries have gone to other companies have gone to other countries. And then after going to other countries, then they post lower paying positions there, and Americans don't apply, and then they get the H-1B visa. There's just a small processing fee, bada bing, bada boom, and now housing in Dallas is more expensive because H-1B visa immigrants are coming over to the country and legally buying up houses. The Trump administration said, we're going to slap a $100,000 six-figure fee on each H-1B visa. And all of these companies, to their blue states attorneys general, started complaining and saying, that's an unfair tax. That's very mean. And so this federal judge has now ruled that the Trump administration cannot place fees on H-1B visas because that's a tax on something that is not regulated in and of itself by the United States Congress, beside just the initial congressional framing of the visas themselves. It truly is insane. And then, of course, you have Democrats who are earnestly focused on saying that Immigration Customs Enforcement can't even go through with the deportation process. No denaturalizations. So even if you come to the United States and you violate a bunch of crimes, you emigrated here to the United States, and then you broke a bunch of laws, a bunch of, let's say, very violent, let's say sexual assault laws. One of the 17 laws that the Department of Justice is suggesting that 17 individuals they're currently denaturalizing. Those laws violated. Well, here's Pramila Jayapal throwing her ever-loving conniption fits because she says the Trump administration shouldn't be allowed to deport anybody ever for any reason whatsoever.
My First Amendment prohibits funds in this bill from being used by ICE to detain or deport U.S. citizens. We should all agree U.S. citizens should never be detained by any agency conducting civil immigration enforcement, and they certainly should not be deported.
Okay, so again, fun fact. If you are a naturalized U.S. citizen, you can, in fact, have your citizenship stripped from you because when you took an oath to this country, when you went through the naturalization process to become a U.S. citizen, you made a series of promises. This oath actually is supposed to have some weight. And if you violate that oath by violating the rights in theft from your fellow Americans by illegally taking Medicare funding or Medicaid funding, or funds reserved for children with autism, or funds reserved for those with Down syndrome families, or funds reserved for feeding children, like Feeding Our Futures, nonprofit law, mortgage law, other kinds of various fraud like transportation and trucking companies, then you can have your citizenship stripped from you, the Velcro flag ripped off, and you are sent back from whence you came. But this is a major problem for those on the left. Because if you get rid of them, well, not only do you get rid of a very nice voter base, you get rid of the idea that immigrants in and of themselves are virtuous just because they're immigrants. Just like the left's major contention that all that makes you virtuous is being poor. All rich people, bad. All poor people, good. All Native Americans are bad, unless they're Native Americans. All immigrants, good. All white people, bad. All people of color, whatever that means, good. And on it goes. Well, unless that person of color just so happens to be on the Republican side of the aisle. And that brings us over to the senator from South Carolina, who we'll be going to in just a second. Before we get there, though, when I mean that this crew is unhinged, here's Rick Wilson, the Lincoln Project. Yes, the guy, the tiki torches and the faking a bunch of alt-right movements or rallies or whatever. Here is Rick Wilson getting out and just openly calling for Stephen Miller, the deputy White House chief of staff, to be hanged at Nuremberg trials.
When Stephen Miller goes out and calls a guy who was, by every account so far, who never had a legal problem, had a concealed carry permit, had a gun permit in Minnesota. He was a nurse. He was nice to his neighbors. And you know what? Stephen Miller went out and called him a domestic terrorist, claiming he was trying to assassinate those ICE agents. I almost tweeted this today, and I know I'll get canceled for saying this. I know I'm going to get in trouble. I want Stephen Miller to be the number one in the Nuremberg trials when this is done. When this is done, I want Stephen Miller to be the first one who is tried and convicted and dangles. Okay? I want him to be brought before a court of law because he is the sole executive that runs all this DHS ICE stuff.
No, not even remotely close. Radio crew, we'll send you over to the commercial. Try not to call for just regular average people to be hanged while we're away. We'll bring you back in a second. We're going to continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Again, for those who are just now joining us, right now our radio crew and TV crews, they're away on the commercial break. We're going to continue here on the live stream, and especially if you're watching us live, no extra commercials for you. So, Rick Wilson here, and a lot of those on the left. You may notice a bit of a bifurcation, all right, a bit of a dual reality here. On the right, have I called for people to be hanged? Absolutely, 100%, and will continue to do so. But there's a bit of a difference. So not only do I have hair and a testosterone count that doctors would consider normal, unlike Rick here, but also the individuals that I call to be hanged are those who have committed violent sexual crimes, those who have committed legal, definable, by the law treason. If you aid and abet a foreign enemy of the United States, you should be hanged by the neck publicly until dead. If you sexually violate someone, you take away the most sacred of their rights, you should be hanged by the neck in public until dead. But if you're just going out there and saying, who should be hanged? Everyone I disagree with. I'm thinking that they're kind of two different things here. And this, again, this weird double standard, it is quite literally now the centerpiece of American politics. Because on the right, you will have a group of individuals who are indeed calling for a series of investigations and arrests. Because there are things that are an anathema to the American people. There are those who are supposed to be receiving. If I'm going to pay for federal benefits, if I'm going to pay for Medicare and for Medicaid, if I'm going to pay for food programs, if I'm going to pay for all of these other programs that are already, because they are bureaucratic, because bureaucratic programs are always going to be filled with bloat and rot and waste, then at the very minimum, those who are my countrymen, black, white, brown, whatever, doesn't matter, those who are citizens of the United States and are, by the program's aim, supposed to be getting that money, better get that money. They better get that money. I don't want to, and by the way, I don't care if we're talking about the EBT program and food stamps. Far better for EBT money to go to the essential nutrients that people need rather than companies using the EBT program, like a popular sponsor that just so happens to sponsor a lot of conservative shows and that lobbying group, who really like padding their pockets with the carbonated funds of knowing that as long as people can spend EBT funds on soda and soft drinks instead of the core nutrients they need to survive, well, if that's a little bit of extra federal money, well, so what if that isn't actually helping Americans out? So what if that's taking from American taxpayers? It's disgusting. And it is disgusting no matter where it is. There are a lot of Republicans in the middle of this country, in states like Ohio and Indiana and Wisconsin, where there are corporate executives who think, and we saw this in Nebraska, for example, as well, the food canning plant raid, where maybe we need illegal immigrants to work on the farms and in the canning factories, because if we don't have cheap labor, we'll all go under. There has never been a point in human history in which the greater suffering of individuals and under slave labor has been acceptable. There has never been a point at which we must ask Americans to participate in a disgusting human trafficking filled practice so that some individual out there can get their crop pickers or can get their food canning employees, when a lot of those companies are not even providing the job applications to the American public first. And that is one of the reasons why that questions by, for example, candidate for governor Vivek Ramaswamy in Ohio are essential. Those questions are essential. I want you to tell me how your administration in Ohio is going to combat and target the Somali fraud, the broader Middle Eastern, African, and Asian fraud that has been perpetuated. Because what I'm seeing are Central and South American countries that are getting this under control. I don't see a lot of people calling those Central and South American countries racist for doing so. We're going to come out and bring in Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. Great conversation here. We'll talk about how deep this fraud goes. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
Well, if you can believe it, there is actually a Republican senator from the state of South Carolina, despite, I'm being told, all of the gerrymandering heinous. Obviously, the Senate has nothing to do with gerrymandering. Senator Tim Scott, good to have you. I'm told you're a lone survivor that unless they're a Democrat, no one is allowed to be black and elected to Congress, I guess.
Yeah, Tony, it's not quite true, but certainly there's no doubt that the Republican Party under Donald Trump has produced more African-American Republicans than any time in my lifetime that I can remember. I will say that the folks in the House, two running for governor, one decided not to run for re-election, one running for the Senate, will leave us with me having to be the chairman, the vice chairman, as well as the treasurer of the African-American Republicans in the Senate. But that's okay. We'll get more soon.
I'm glad to hear it. I couldn't help but start out that way, since I know that you had been erased from existence in that whole conversation.
Well, Tony, as you know, unfortunately, and according to Democrats, I'm not black because I'm a Republican, and they want to talk about redistricting. The one thing I can say about redistricting, especially in the South and specifically in South Carolina, is that we've already proven that a black man can win in the first congressional district, because I did that. We've proven that he can win statewide because I've done that. So what we know for sure is that voters throughout the South and at home in South Carolina are more concerned with your values than how much melanin you have in your skin. Great news for our country.
Well, I mean, it would be nice to see the values-based candidate in every election across the states. But unfortunately, on the Democrat ticket in Texas, this Talarico guy is, I know that while we're dealing with Platner, that we've left Talarico alone for a couple of minutes, but with more stuff coming out over the weekend of the stuff that this man has said, I have no idea how he is going to make a pitch to Texas voters at all. Does he think he's running in LA?
He must think he's running in LA or someplace else, maybe another country, because this guy is blasphemous, is the best word for what he says. Blasphemous. It is unbelievable and undeniable, out of step with the average Texan. And I got to think, even the average Democrat in Texas, when given a choice between Paxton and Talarico, they're going to say, I'm going to go with the Republican on this one, because Texans, we love they love their food. They love their beef, not vegans, but beef, and they love the Lord. And so when you have a candidate as out of step and inconsistent with reality as Talarico, you got to ask yourself, what in the world are the Democrats thinking? Well, the answer is simple. They're thinking about rebranding the entire party under the umbrella of Talarico and Platner, which means they're making more room for the Great Opportunity Party to expand in new regions of this country, because the Democrats, they are losing their voters because they've lost their ever-loving mind.
I mean, look, we could talk about losing your ever-loving mind, and Platner comes to mind all single day, every night. I mean, this guy, every time you look into his past, it's like opening up a garbage bin that's been sitting out in the sun. You're just hit with a new wave of stench.
Yes.
Obviously, Maine's a different region than Texas. So do you think that with the primary being tomorrow, obviously Maine voters are going to make a pretty limited choice on the blue side of the aisle? Do you think that the Democrats have a plan to kind of carry Platner to the finish? Or is this something that they're going to kind of Kamala Harris, Joe Biden swap their way out of post-primary?
I think the latter, not the former. Here's what we know. The Schumer shady tricks is going to happen again. Chuck Schumer has decided to lean in heavily with Platner because the Democrat Party doesn't care what you believe. All they want is power. This has been their insatiable desire for decades. Now their candidate selection tells me that not only are they out of step with reality and their voters, but they're so desperate for power that they'll bring forward the most provocative, disgusting candidate they can find and hope to trick the voter, deceive the voter long enough to get across the finish line. But thank God Almighty, we've had more lead on the target in Texas and in Maine than in other places, because these candidates make it easy to hit because there's so much space to hit them on.
I mean, there's also a lot of stuff that they're, at least on that side of the aisle, that I see people trying to kind of whistle past the graveyard. This comes in many flavors, of course, as we've talked about with Talarico and Platner's pasts, but also on the things that Americans are dealing with every day, specifically fraud. How many times are we going to come into contact with this massive fraud ring, whatever flavor, whatever region that you want to talk about, that Americans are realizing they've been cheated, they've been ripped off, they've been deprived of certain assets, and the multiple tiers of what's considered allowed on one side of the aisle. From your work in the Senate, because I know you've done some work over on the Help Committee here, tell us about what your experience has been looking into some of this fraud stuff.
It's really disturbing, to be honest with you, Tony. If you think about states like Minnesota, California, New York, Illinois, these are states that have had high levels of fraud. And we obviously are very familiar with the Somalians in Minnesota. $18 billion of fraud. But think about it from a percentage basis. In some states, 22% of benefits that go to help people used for fraud.
Stop, sir. Excuse me, Senator. Hold on. You can't just say that and then let's move on from that. Can you repeat that again? What percentage of state benefits is fraudulent?
Up to 22% in some states. It makes my soul ache. It makes me nauseous to know that we are allowing some states to run rampant with fraud. And the only time we find out about it is when Dr. Oz shows up. What happened to the states being responsible for themselves? We know they're underwater with their retirement plans. We know they're underwater with their health care benefits. But now we know that they allow for lying and literally cheating and stealing from the most vulnerable people in their states because of fraud. This is not simply Minnesota. It includes California. Right. It includes New York, and it includes Illinois, and it goes further. But what we know for sure, 22%. There's no way to explain that except for you're asleep at the wheel and you need new government.
So, I mean, on that line, you and I were talking a few minutes ago about how when you got into Congress, when you ran for that House seat in South Carolina, a bit of a difference. Can you imagine a headline when you were serving in the House, like we needed Dr. Oz to expose massive level fraud that between a fourth and a fifth of a state's benefits that are fraudulent?
No way. Hey, let's the letter I just wrote. I wrote one to California, wrote one to New York, and the number that I want to highlight: nationwide, fraud takes up at least $187 billion a year, and in a 10-year budget window, nearly $2 trillion.
Gracious.
Freaking fraud. I don't understand how these states aren't livid. The citizens need to be informed on how bad and pathetic their leaders are. We're learning more about Waltz in Minnesota, but we need to make sure that there's a lot of lead on the target of Newsom, who wants to run for president. President of what? Venezuela? I don't know where. Because here's another person who allows fraud to go unnoticed, and frankly, he condones it. Why? He wants to keep it quiet enough so he can finish a presidential run.
Well, of course, you have, his Senator Adam Schiff, and then you have, in Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren. And the reason I mention her is, of course, because you're the chair of the Banking, the Urban Affairs, and the Housing Committee, not in that order. And so you obviously have to spend a lot of time with colleagues who make excuses based on, again, kind of a multiple tiered system. What are you doing between now and the election day to try to angle these committees, despite some of their more colorful characters, into exposing some of this stuff for Americans?
Yeah, we're going to have oversight hearings. One of the things we're going to do, we're starting with China as well, by the way, because we've got another major issue. A lot of the negativity that we see in America comes from influencers from China, from Russia, North Korea, frankly, even Iran. And so we're going to have some hearings as it relates to exposing the bad behavior from these adversaries. And at the same time, I hope to put more lead on the target by using cabinet members like Scott Turner at HUD to look at the housing and the homelessness. What we found under the Biden administration: more money, more homeless. Huh? Yes, more money, more homeless. Tony, you can't make this up. And under President Donald J. Trump, homelessness has gone down. We're making people more responsible. So the contrast is helpful for the American people to understand that when you choose a leader like Donald Trump, when you choose a visionary like President Trump, you get better results. And when you take every single penny and you realize that the penny you're looking at isn't a federal dollar. It's the dollar of an American taxpayer. There's no such thing as a federal dollar, Tony. They all come from the pockets of hardworking Americans. We need to make sure that we honor the commitment to them more than anything else, Tony.
Well said. Senator Tim Scott, the conservative juggernaut, the guy who keeps Elizabeth Warren awake at night. Thank you very much for giving us just a couple of minutes. Really appreciate your work, sir.
Yes, sir, Tony. I look forward to doing this again.
All right. We're going to send the radio crew over to the commercial break. And in the meantime, we're going to cover some of the growing primary chaos from Los Angeles to Maine. Quite literally coast to coast stuff. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. We'll continue on the live stream. All right, while they're away at their commercial break, let's talk for a second before we get into the primaries tomorrow, which, by the way, those closing times, Maine, most or all of those elections, all of those precincts will close at 8 p.m. Eastern. The reason we say most or all there, we're getting some conflicting reports on all of the precincts in Maine. Nevada, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. local. North Dakota depends on the county and the time zone that you're in. Most of them, however, for that primary close at 9 p.m. Eastern or 8 p.m. local. Again, North Dakota is split kind of funny, so pay attention to your local stuff there. And then, of course, who we just had on, Senator Tim Scott's state, South Carolina, those polls are closed at 7 p.m. Eastern. So we will be bringing you updates on all of the elections as they come out, most definitely Maine and South Carolina. So that brings us over to the really great times with Maine, Graham Platner, and James Talarico. So there's a lot of chaos going on in primary elections, but the general elections aren't looking too great either. And the reason is because the Democrats have picked right here, right now, to represent them in this year. They've recognized after 2024, even if the whole autopsy report suggested very differently, and then they corrected it and left a bunch of pages, definitely not deleted, wink, wink, that actually it was Americans didn't have enough time to love Kamala Harris. They've decided that they need somewhat straight white dudes to run in Senate races. And so they have found two of the best guys they can find, James Talarico, who's currently trying to reinvent himself for Texas, and as usual, focusing on all the wrong stuff. I know, really huge, big, shocker and surprise there. In the meantime, on the main side, Graham Platner, who, again, the Democrats did not bail on him. They did not have enough time to suggest Janet Mills, the governor of Maine, who did, by the way, come out and said, well, I'm still on the ballot, by the way. And then everyone said, no one cares, old lady, and pushed her into the street. So Graham Platner is the guy they're going with, despite all of the scandals. And I do mean all of the scandals. So that on major networks right now, you have a lot of the Democrat strategists and pundits who are looking around and saying, really? This is who you want to go with? This right here? This is the plan? And that plan boils down to suggesting that actually it is not Graham Platner who has the Nazi tattoo and also says that, maybe he wants his opponents possibly to be jailed and thrown in prison and a bunch of other stuff. No, actually, it's Susan Collins of Maine who's the fascist. This was echoed by a few of the left wing's podcasters, so the talking point definitely went out pretty clearly. And of course, you've got James Carville doing the same routine. You have some of the Breaking Points podcasters that are trying this whole run, and it boils down to the very Botoxed and full of herself Jennifer Welch. And that's going to be the bad decisions. And then, of course, after that, we'll talk a little bit about some of these updates in the Los Angeles mayoral primary, the California situation in general, and a little of James Talarico. We got to bring the radio crew back from the commercial break. Don't go anywhere. Tons more on the news side to cover tonight. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Really bad decisions. Right as you get to the end of the primaries, into that 2026 midterm shenanigan, it all comes down to just bad decisions left and then more left. So we'll start off nice and simple here, because you haven't heard a lot about James Talarico if you don't live in Texas. Everyone has started talking about the man with every single skeleton in the closet ever. A lot of people are spending all of their time focusing on Graham Platner, and for good reason. We'll get to him. James Talarico, oh, bless his heart. He's got a brand new strategy. All right. He's got a whole different thing going on in the meantime. So James Talarico has decided that the biggest accusations against him are not that he called God non-binary, are not that he made the horrible decision to go in on transgender youth transition care, or not that he's wildly socialist and for a lot of gun control. No. James Talarico has suggested that actually the problem is that he was called a vegan. That's what's going to kill him in Texas. So again, we'll get to some of this election stuff in Los Angeles here in a couple of minutes. Here is, bless his heart, James Talarico has strutted out with a brand new photo op. That's right. They took him to someplace, your basic kind of log cabin-ish on the inside style, Texas barbecue joint, and they've got a huge tray of food in front of him. And so he picks up the teeniest, tiniest wing that he can, and he nibbles on the end of it. Now, right off to the bat, this is terrible. Here's why. No one in their right mind on God's green earth picks up of the two kinds of wings that there are. No one picks up a buffalo wing and makes the decision to try to dive into a flat by nibbling on the end. No one does that. No one on God's green earth does this. It's terrible. It's awkward. It's awful. I mean, at least have the clout if you're, a candidate to ask for all drumsticks. This has the same weight as Jacob Fry of Minneapolis eating Somalian, the combination of chickpeas and, according to the recipe book, dirt, and pretending, oh, it's really good. It's delicious. I sure do enjoy that barbecue. It's so good. Yeah. So again, that's where his efforts are spent at the moment. Seriously, that's where all of the attention is going for him. With one small addendum. He's decided of all the things to flip-flop on, not the God is non-binary thing, not the Jesus would have loved for you to get an abortion thing, not the transgender your children thing, not the gun control thing. Actually, he's decided to go in on big oil. So he's going to make the case that Donald Trump and Greg Abbott have been really, really super duper ultra bad for oil and gasoline. I'm not joking. Here you go.
We have to protect good paying oil and gas jobs. I've had family members who have worked in the oil and gas industry. I went to Texas public schools funded by Texas Oil and Gas. So I owe a lot to the industry. And I know that some of these jobs keep whole families afloat. Sure. And so I want to protect our status as an energy leader here in Texas.
Oh, we wants to protect. Well, there have been a lot of oil and gas jobs lost, don't you know there? And he wants to protect all. That sounds pretty good. No one's buying it, Bob, because not only did he, as a state legislator, introduce a bill to ban oil and gas from the state of Texas. Holy crap, to quote Frank Barone. But then, said it was unchristian to use fossil fuels. Oh, and yeah, we have that on video.
You can't call yourself a Christian and destroy God's creation with greenhouse gases.
With greenhouse gases. How could you do it? Okay, so I'm sure everyone is totally going to believe him. Okay, great, super duper. That brings us to the cultural part of the argument. So again, the economic argument, there is none. There is no case to be made for James Talarico. So then we got to get to the rest of the candidates. Again, the Senate is supposed to be in play. Republicans have a lot of people retiring. They're not exactly well liked. Maybe you can scoop up a couple of seats. Well, no. And the reason that we're getting to the well no is that, again, going up against Susan Collins, a Republican senator who is not well liked. She is one of the 4 to 5 Republican senators standing in the way of the Save America Act. She is, openly. So why can't the Democrats really get like an open field for taking down Susan Collins? Because they have actually brought in, again, we've gone over this on the show extensively, so is the rest of the news ecosystem, the Nazi tattooed, alleged domestic abuser, smacking, beating women around, shoving them into rooms, holding the doors shut, grabbing and shaking women, probably maybe chatting with underage women on Kik in a towel as a newlywed, cheating on his wife all the time since 2023, said veterans should die, said they should have been killed by ISIS, said that he only pleasures himself in porta potties. And that's only just a few of the massive series of scandals that this dude has had. Despite being a rabid Bernie Sanders kind of socialist with a fake oyster farm that's not making a living by the seaside, who is actually just funding his mommy's little private West want. So he's being propped up by his parents like every single socialist. So this dude, his supporters say that, is there anything that could actually, what if instead of a Nazi tattoo, the totem cloth, what if he had an Israeli flag? Would that be disqualifying? Here are Graham Platner's own supporters, ladies and gentlemen.
Totem coat tattoo, the Nazi tattoo. How do you kind of?
Somebody said that they talked to somebody who had seen one of those or wore one of those, and it was silver, and it didn't even occur to him that it was the same thing. I think people are making as much of it as they can because they don't have a lot of substance around anything else. And if they did, we'd hear about it, believe me. They are trolling for dirt.
What if he had like a Israeli flag tattoo or something? Would that be a deal breaker?
For me?
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah.
That would be
Israeli? Yeah, because I don't support genocide, and he doesn't either. And
the man with a Nazi tattoo for the SS of the Third Reich of Germany, known, trademarked for its genocide, just so happens to be defended because, well, at least he doesn't have an Israeli tattoo. That would be real super genocide. Oh, okay. Okay, that's some healthy mental stuff. But anyway, P Hustle, as he's called on Kik Messenger, he's busy getting into a fun fist fight with John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. Again, one of the last sane people on the left socially. Here's John Fetterman, again, calling out why Platner would be just giving Susan Collins all of the runway in the world.
Yeah, well, no, of course, I never heard from P. Hustle. But what's strange with P. Hustle is back in April, he was doing an interview on that pro-Hamas Zedio network or whatever that thing is. And he said that I am the bane of his existence, and really was angry how I dressed too. And now I said, now, P. Hustle, here's a great chance. You can just prove that all these people that you're dropping those dick pics saying these things to were over 18, and now I will wear a suit every day in the Senate, and now you can set the record clear and provide all those texts and all those conversations that you were having as a newlywed, but just before you were going to run for the Senate.
Now, this was not exactly well received by Platner up at his little super duper rally that he had with Ro-Khanna. And we're going to get to that over on the live stream side of things. Radio crew, alas, it is time for me to send you and the TV broadcast crew, at least some of the TV broadcast crew, out for the evening. We'll be back tomorrow. We're going to continue on the live stream. We have way more news to cover, so the show's not over anytime soon. So to our fond radio crew, this is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care. Okay. So while the radio crew is away, we'll continue. Very, very grumpy response from Platner against Fetterman. Doesn't like people calling out again that he on Kick Messenger. And by the way, he only made that account inactive last week. The account on the #1, predator minor messaging website. That website that Platner was using to talk to women that he, totally wink, totally. Nope. Was verifying the ages of the girls he was talking to, wink, that kind of a thing. Over on Kick Messenger, that account was only deactivated last week. He doesn't like Fetterman pointing this out because you're supposed to toe the line. It's just that people seem to remember what happens when you toe the line all the way to hell.
But the Senate really is a place it's a lot about relationships. And I don't want to go down there and simply be non-functional. I mean, as you can all probably tell, I got a lot of criticisms about the way this government functions. But in order for us to make it functional, we're going to have to do stuff. And you can't just go down there and be John Fetterman. And just kind of just sort of be an asshole. That is not. He said mean things about me. I'm allowed to say that. But no, that's not. There's no point.
Okay, so the criticism that he's making is that Fetterman is down there not doing Democrat things. Here's the issue. By the way, the reason this is kind of funny, a little bit ironic here, Alanis Morissette, get your guitar, is that the accusation being made by Platner against Fetterman here is that he's not really a Democrat because he says, hey, maybe you shouldn't be an alleged pedophile who could have been messaging little girls on the literal platform built and maintained for predators to message minors. According to journalists and media reporting here in the United States on the left, right, and center, abroad, left, right, and center, do in fact report on this. Thousands upon thousands of predators arrested who were trying to reach out to young girls and teenage girls on Kick Messenger. And again, the man whose profile picture on that site was just him in italic, and he's married, just married in 23. And flirting with so many women that there are entire Facebook pages where it's like, hey, are we dating the same guy? Who are like, hey, we're all talking to Graham Platner, right? And his big criticism of Fetterman is that, well, he's not a Democrat enough. Here's the funny thing. Fetterman, the reason that I would never vote for Fetterman, unless I was, choosing between him and Elizabeth Warren, is that Fetterman still votes with Democrats 94 to 98% of the time. He is a very progressive Democrat in how he votes. Only in some foreign policy things and some judicial nomination confirmation votes does Fetterman also vote alongside Republicans, which is when also some Democrats vote alongside Republicans. Bizarre, very, very bizarre. And the reason that this is extra funny, the reason this would be the ironic getting, Alanis Morissette involved here, is that the reason Susan Collins is being called a MAGA fascist, for example, by Jennifer Welch, the Botox bimbo, is that, well, actually, Susan Collins is a fascist because she votes alongside Republicans. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say that Fetterman isn't a super duper Democrat, even though he votes alongside you because he says, hey, you know what? Maybe your ethical situation sucks and you should go sit down. That kind of criticism can't then be turned around and leveraged if Susan Collins is a fascist because of her voting record. You can't have it both ways here, Sean Spencer. A little psych reference for some of you out there. So here would be, we'll get back to Ro Khanna having it both ways in a second. I've referenced this now a couple times. Here's Jennifer Welch being Jennifer Welch.
Everybody's talking about toxic relationships and tattoos.
No, people are not talking about toxic relationships and tattoos. This is what the Democrats are trying to gaslight you off with. It's, toxic relationship. Graham Platner was in a toxic relationship. You know, it takes like two to tango and stuff, you know. No, they're talking about Graham Platner having a history of being possibly domestically abusive to women, about cheating on his wife right after they got married several times, quite a many times. You know, that kind of a thing. Also, the tattoo thing, it's not tattoos. It's not, should someone with tattoos be in Congress? No. What people have been pointing out is that Pete Hegseth, who has on his chest the cross of Jerusalem, which is everywhere in Jerusalem, and is simply just a very asymmetrical cross with 4 small crosses in the various quadrants. That's it, just to represent Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That's the Jerusalem cross. That was called a Nazi tattoo, whereas Graham Platner's actual legitimate clear Totenkopf from the guy who on Reddit said that he could identify by the year different Wehrmacht German helmets. And that's not a Nazi. So just to clarify, before we even get into the gaslighting here, this isn't just toxic relationships and like tattoos, like, oh my God, add a tramp stamp. No, this is about one individual's possibly very abusive history and his Totenkopf.
And all of this talk about Susan Collins voting to dismantle protections that keep women safe and keep women free.
Sources do trust me. Susan Collins is like trying to dress up women in red robes and white hats, and they're keeping women free. Oh my God, women, girl power. They're not free.
Because that is the real story here. They don't want us talking about that. Susan Collins needs to be defeated. She trots out, I'm a centrist. I think Donald Trump has learned his lesson. She is a MAGA fascist to her core. And just want to throw this in there too. I don't give a if somebody had a toxic relationship. I myself have been a toxic girlfriend. I've had toxic boyfriends.
Okay, boys, girls, and squirrels. So just a couple of things here. And I love sharing this with those who are the coastal elites who for some reason think that every single relationship or every person's history includes a massively high body count and just being a hoe bag around you and everyone else and toxic and awful. That's not the norm. And just because you're trash doesn't mean that that's an excuse for everyone else to be trash. So if you were toxic and threw things at someone that you were dating and acted nasty and disgusting, and maybe you were abusive, because God knows there's quite a few instances, and that's an understatement of the century, of women who are domestically abusive to their boyfriends, fiancés, and husbands. And there are far too many who have been domestically abusive to women that they have dated and been engaged to and married. One does not exonerate the other. I mean, again, I'm curious as to when or when, we're going to get into Ro Khanna with this later, because they want to have it both ways. They really want to use, anytime someone says a Republican was big and stinky and mean, to just use the allegation itself as the noose closing around the neck, you know, the smoking gun, that's it, it's over. But then they want to turn around and say, well, maybe he did it, but I was toxic too. I don't think that's really the argument you want to make there, Karen.
That's part of the human experience,
it's
right?
It's not. I have dated a number of girls before I got married, and no, never was hit or did any hitting. Didn't do any kind of weird toxic-y, any gaslighting, anything like that. Normal people don't. And if there are some people who have, a lot of them at least have the common decency to be ashamed of having been so and done so.
Susan Collins allegedly was banging her current husband while his wife was dying of cancer.
Okay, so again, let's pretend that that's true. Okay, all right. Are there a lot of individuals in politics, in the media side and the elected side, in the staffers side and the production side, that have schlepped around and cheated and been adulterous? Yep, absolutely. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. An affair that happened in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, even in the teens. If I'm choosing between, and I'm sorry, it's a binary choice. Those who pretend it's not a binary choice, we didn't actually run a bunch of primary candidates where this was on the ballot. However, someone who cheated on their spouse, someone who committed violent gun crimes and possibly chatted with a bunch of minors like in the last 3 years, and then, with the towel on, just bought a bunch of cocaine, only gets off in porta potties and says a bunch of veterans should die, and on and on and on and on and on. And oh yeah, the whole Nazi tattoo thing, and also the Bernie Sanders Marxist socialist. Yeah, I'm thinking this whole lot worse than, 30 years ago, 40, I guess 70s aren't 30 years ago anymore. 50 years ago, oof, cheated on their spouse. Again, is that good? No. But if we're going to start like equating things from 50 years ago versus crimes that happened possibly a couple of weeks ago, no.
So if we're going to get into all this stuff, let's get into all the MAGA. Let's dredge up Kim Paxton, Donald Trump, Susan Collins, all of it. Let's do a roll call for all of them.
Okay, so again, so this is the fun part. Well, let's just everybody. This is what Ro Khanna wants to do. So he wants to, everybody. Again, let's just everybody. So this is the Democrats' last little poll here. They'll say, well, I'm actually for exposing everybody. But yet they're not. And this is why you see some Democrat strategists who are panicking right now. Because the only thing they had going for them at the moment, the only thing they had going for them this year was that, yeah, sure, Sheila Syphilis McCormick had been kicked out. And then that one other lady who took a bunch of instructions from Jeffrey Epstein in, 2019 during a bunch of Trump hearing stuff on the left side of the aisle, and Eric Swalwell. What they had was those people had resigned, had stepped down, had left. Platner's here now. He's here now. The Herschel Walker stuff, his issues and scandals, that partially sunk his campaign. It did. Can't pretend otherwise. It's not going to be a walk in the park anymore. And again, you also just said that you're also horrible. So can we throw you out too? Or if we're going to play by this game, okay, but you're not going to win the Puritan match, sweetheart.
Main thing you have to look at, Maine, is there is a woman who has a record, decades-long record, of voting against women, voting against freedom, voting for corporations, and abandoning the working class people of Maine.
Okay. Look, I'm going to be pretty clear with you here before we get to covering the Los Angeles stuff, just as a good kind of disclaimer. I am partisan. I'm a conservative. You know this. I hopefully most of the time, I give you the news, I give you the details, and then I give you some analysis, and past that comes my commentary and speculation. I hope I make that clear. I hope I never come to the point where I state, well, this person's bad because they vote against women, and they vote against freedom, and they vote against America. I hope I never do that. I hope when I reference James Talarico, I say when he was in the state legislature, he tried to pass a bill that would ban gas and oil development in the state of Texas. I hope that I maintain an attitude and an ability. When I say that Graham Platner is a Bernie Sanders Marxist, I say that because he pushes Bernie Sanders style regulatory pieces of proposed legislature. When he suggests he wants to arrest his political opponents, I cite the incident. I cite the event. I keep receipts. Okay, I could be sponsored by CVS if I wanted to, I guess. Maybe. Just all the receipts that go on here on the Tony Kinnett Cast. Hopefully, I am not trying to gaslight you and say, they're like, they voted for evil, and I voted for good. Just retarded. Retarded. All right, just the absolute bottom of the bucket nonsense. So, that all said and aside on this particular matter, I do want to give you some of the updates on Los Angeles. Okay, so on the California gubernatorial, I said at the time, I did not believe when we were in the end of last week that we were going to see the California Republican candidate who was in the lead, been on the show before, Steve Hilton. I did not believe that we were going to see him be overtaken by Tom Steyer, who, again, the super duper billionaire who threw a ton of money into that election. By the way, whatever happened to billionaires buying elections? That didn't work out too well, did it? Huh? Curious. Anyway, so I didn't really show a lot of concern there, but I did say that I was rather concerned because Los Angeles was known for a very significant and highly contrived ballot harvesting operation, in which you would have a lot of the Los Angeles kind of corporatist Democrats, the very few that remain, and then the hyper progressives under Raman, who would go around to places like Skid Row to go to the homeless encampments and then try to get as many people as possible, because under the California policies currently, everyone gets a ballot. Everyone gets a ballot, everybody. And so all you got to do is show up, have someone say, I'll go turn in your ballot for you. You go ahead and vote. And then as long as it is in the ballot, or it's in the ballot box and it is postmarked by election day, then it will eventually be counted. And I said, again, this is rather skeezy. We've known this is skeezy for a very long time. And over the weekend, boy, howdy, wouldn't you know it? Wouldn't you know it? I know I'm as surprised as you were. We started to see something rather strange. And here's what we saw. If you can see on the live stream, if you're watching the podcast, allow me to tell you about the lines. So we have these ballot dumps, meaning this latest collection of ballots that are being brought to this processing facility that did not have a ton of people working around the clock to get these ballots processed. As a lot of individuals had pointed out through photos of the facility, there were people who were just standing there, not working. There were entire ballot stations that weren't operational, just kind of taking our sweet time about it. And what we saw initially from election night, from day 1 to 2 and to day 3, was something rather strange. The number of ballots with each consecutive dump that would be brought in would defy statistical odds. Meaning this, originally on election night, we saw Karen Bass take a pretty huge leap. Behind her, we saw Spencer Pratt, the independent/Republican, Trump-esque kind of populist guy, former reality host, would also gain a significant upswing. And then down at the bottom, so much so that she actually gave a speech at the end of the night crying, was Nithya Raman. And then after that evening, things got rather interesting. So there was the first day of some ballot drops, and I know that we showed this. Let me scoot back to this particular photo here. So we had in the first couple of hours of day 1 and 2, and then right at the end there, day 3, see June 4th at about 4 o'clock, you saw that there were sizable Spencer Pratt chunks. And I said I cast a little bit of hesitation on this Rasmussen report that had said there was 0 because that was based on media reports and not actually the ballot dumps. After this point, though, some very weird stuff started to happen. We saw that, again, against all statistical probability, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute, we saw Karen Bass continue to get about the same percentage of every ballot drop that was consistent with her election night numbers. And then we saw almost no ballots going to Spencer Pratt and a ton of ballots far outperforming her election day performance for the Los Angeles mayoral race, going to Nithya Raman. And it continued and continued, and some of us pointed out on Saturday into Sunday, actually over in our show's Discord, you can find a link to that description. You saw some of the messages come in. Here we go. Here comes the numbers that are trending up. The ballots for Nithya Raman are coming in, and they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and Spencer Pratt's are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Until, as of today, Nithya Raman has officially passed Spencer Pratt in the primary, knocking him out of the runoff. That is when the Decision Desk headquarters, as of yesterday, and I want to make sure I get the exact time, June the 7th, yesterday, at 7:58 p.m., so almost 24 hours ago, officially called the second slot for the runoff in the primary for Nithya Raman in the jungle primary. I guess it's not a runoff. It would just be the end of the primary and then headed toward the general. And a lot of people in the country, and I mean a huge chunk of the people in the country, were very, very suspicious because there had been this 43,000-ish vote gain out of any kind of statistical expectation of how the percentages would go and what would be considered an after election day kind of mail-in ballot climb for any candidate, period. And Spencer Pratt made the case that it was rather interesting and curious that there just so happened to be about 43,000 homeless individuals in Los Angeles. Now, I am not going to make any comment at this time, about whether or not I believe that there, a bunch of people bringing up blank ballots to the homeless and saying, hey, vote for this person right here, and then running off with them. I will say that Nithya Raman had a very, very significant and a very sophisticated ballot harvesting operation. This was expected because of the California and the Los Angeles rules and policies in which you can show an expired, I think as a commenter put it earlier in the show, as Ben Shapiro said earlier today, you could show an expired by 5 years LA fitness card, and that counts as ID to register to vote. You don't actually need any kind of real ID to vote in Los Angeles. That all they needed to do was do enough ballot harvesting, and hesto presto, it could secure the election. That is the policy that was set up very, very, very clearly. At the same time, there was a take from a guy on the social media sphere called Polymath, because as Crystal Ball over from Breaking Point's left-wing podcast pointed out, she said, are these people, referring to Republicans and independents in the country, are these people really dumb enough to be shocked that a Republican lost in Los Angeles, or are they just lying? Now again, like a lot of the rest of the leftist messaging that we've reported on in the show today, that's gaslighting. And again, this is what Polymath says. He said, quote, no one expected Pratt to win, but they were surprised to see that after he cleanly beat the second place Democrat on election night, they were surprised to only have her win the late ballots so hard that they look like two completely different elections. And it is true. And Nate Silver points this out as well over from his bullet report, that in California, this is a feature. It is not a bug. Now, this is the last I will say on the matter for now, because yes, there are individuals from the Department of Justice that are reportedly beginning to look into this. I will say that this is legal in Los Angeles to do this. The reason that Americans are passionate about the Save America Act is because there are other polities. There are other state directorates in this country. There are representatives in the House. There are senators in the Senate that are openly calling for Los Angeles policy to be for the entire country. James Talarico of Texas told Pete Hegseth back when he was doing the Fox Weekend show that he was against any kind of voter ID law. This right here is why. This is the ballot harvesting mechanism that is why Joe Biden outperformed in the 2020 election. That is not me even making that conclusion. Political analysts, election analysts, all the way from the right with Brianna Lyman over at The Federalist and my friends over there, all the way, of course, my colleagues at the Daily Signal, to the center side of the aisle from kind of the Substack community of independent authors. Barry Weiss's crew, when she was with the Free Press, made this argument regarding ballot harvesting operations and unlimited mail-in ballot whateverableness. And then over to the left side of the aisle, there were individuals, for example, like Ezra Klein's Abundance crew, which have said that eventually Democrats would have to operate with some standards of ballot harvesting. Why? Because they worried that essentially someday they would have a guy like Scott Pressler who just starts operating by these rules and encourages hyper infinity scale ballot harvesting to this degree. Which is, by the way, this is what I actually advocate for. If the rules are the rules, then play by the rules. As the famous YouTuber Julian Smith, the great producer of the Hot Kool-Aid YouTube viral video from my youth, once told me, Tony, when you play Monopoly, do you play by the rules that seem nice, or do you play by the rules on the table? I say, I play by the rules on the table. He says, why? He said, to win. And that was a conversation about, producing YouTube videos and not actually about the electoral. But it makes sense here. It does. And it absolutely fits. Now, as to the last thing I'll say on this is what I was alluding to here. I did take the ballot drops, the vote totals and the percentages, and I, out of curiosity, not because I innately trust it, I have a pro subscription to Claude, the Anthropic AI, not an endorsement, not a sponsorship, just the one that I use because I like the way that it looks at data. Honestly, it's almost as autistic as producer Daniel. He's going to kill me for that. Oh, well. I filed it into that software, And I said, hey, this ballot data, these drops, what is the statistical probability that, given how the precincts of Los Angeles have operated in the past, given the timing and the election day results, given the polling data beforehand, including internal polling, I said, what is the statistical probability, again, ignoring kind of modern news, so not like reading kind of the explanations that would be given by the Washington Post or the Midas Touch or whatever, just upon these particular pieces of data, what is the statistical probability that you would see Nithya Raman gain and overtake Spencer Pratt in these percentages? And its response was that there was effectively, and the quote in front of me, Tony, there is effectively no statistical probability that the ballots would lean in this direction based on an analysis of earlier Los Angeles, California, congressional seat, other state mayoral elections, both primary and general. That is a quote directly from Claude. There is no statistical probability. Now, I haven't sat down and done a deep dive on all of the shady and the shenaniganry here. Again, the system is already built to do maximum ballot harvesting and then make it really easy to slip ballots through, even if they're not the best of ballots. I also know that the state of California, via their attorney general and Gavin Newsom, have made it really difficult for the Trump administration to take a look at any voter rolls. In fact, they had, as an official state stance, bucked any kind of state voter roll engagement with the federal government to look at things and to kind of check up on things. I also happen to know that the attorney general in his office is following around the Southern California prosecutor from the attorney general's office like a hawk while he's observing the ballot counting down there. This isn't over. I don't believe it's personally over on that end. However, this was expected. It was expected. I can't turn around and tell you that, oh, I wasn't expecting this at all. Absolutely it was, because the system was built to make it very, very easy for those to vote in Los Angeles as late as they want with maximum ballot harvesting. And I'm sure we'll see more to come. So we're going to kick away really quickly here. And then when we come back in, we're going to talk a little bit about the Knicks and the Spurs this evening. And in the weirdest twist of the entire day, it is Whoopi Goldberg who is right and Stephen A. Smith who is wrong.
Oh, there's a big surprise.
Only it's actually Gilbert Gottfried, a very big surprise. So we're going to talk about that very briefly and then get to some of the closing stuff for the show this evening. Don't go anywhere. Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal.
The Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. There are two major crime incidents kind of cases that are top of the line news, and they just so happen to be coinciding with, of course, the NBA Finals and the New York Knicks and a lot of people that are doing a lot of pearl clutching. Oh, how could the Trump team be going to this game? Oh, how could Mamdani be going to this game? A bunch of nonsense. So we'll probably have to get to some of the Karmelo Anthony stuff right at the end before we head out for the show tonight. On the general crime in New York, though, before we get there, 6 people were taken to the hospital after a stabbing incident in New York City's Penn Station on Sunday night. At least 5 people were stabbed, according to major news outlets. And I believe that we actually have some clip information here from some of the witnesses. Just really, really disgusting stuff regarding this stabbing incident. And then some security concerns as well in New York, because obviously with the president going there, some issues. Here you go.
So at least 6 people are hurt in a stabbing attack at New York City's Penn Station last night, leaving 1 seriously injured.
Looks like they got the guy right there.
Yeah, there's the guy. The stabbing sparking major security concerns as it happened right underneath MSG, Madison Square Garden, where our president is set to attend tonight's NBA Finals game.
Yep, it will be Game 3. Alex Hogan's live in Bedminster, New Jersey with the details. Alex.
Hi. So we'll cut ahead in this particular clip because I want to get you one of the comments from, again, kind of the witness making it clear that not exactly a safe place. It's becoming a regular, though, in New York.
Or minor injuries, and 6 people altogether were taken to the hospital.
I think the chaos of this and things similar to this is sort of becoming regular, which is scary as someone who uses Penn Station and J Transit frequently.
That is a problem. And the reason that it continues to be a problem is because these stabbing attacks, as just being considered the norm, Americans are paying attention. They are, in fact, getting sick of it. And the argument that the UK has made and that Europe has made is that, well, we need to ban knives. That's not going to work here at all. Now, in the meantime, it should also be noted that Karmelo Anthony, who stabbed Austin Metcalf to death, his legal team, his defense, they finally wrapped it up and they rested today. And the reason that they rested today in that Texas case, they have thoroughly and royally messed up. They have. That particular legal defense of Karmelo Anthony, according to the documents from court, I mean, this Karmelo Anthony young man, he was asked to leave the opposing team's tent 15 times and then essentially begged one of the teammates, like Austin Metcalf, to tell him to leave or to shove him out. And then, again, just went right for the blade and then stabbed the young man to death. And the reason that the Karmelo Anthony family, and just to be quite clear here from my read of the situation, that they didn't take an earlier kind of a plea deal here is that would have cut the GoFundMe short because they wanted to do some racial grievance O.J. Simpson style stuff. Oh, isn't it so sad that he's a black child? He had to defend himself against the mean, old, awful white people and that kind of nonsense. Well, it looks now, according to some of the analysis on how this case has gone, that court is about to smack the living crap out of the Karmelo Anthony defense team, and they absolutely deserve it. So we'll cover some of that tomorrow. They make their closing arguments tomorrow, but this will likely be a very quick turnaround and ruling. All right, last but not least, some of the fun here. Over to the New York Knicks. So there's a lot of really upset crying and whining and pearl clutching and upset spaghettiness that Donald Trump might be going to a Knicks game. And I don't quite understand why. I really don't. I don't get it. First of all, I'm not a Knicks fan. I hate the NBA. I'm sorry. I hate it. I love college basketball. I hate the NBA. I think it's garbage. I think it's compromised by China. I think all of the NBA teams, all of them, I don't care for. I'm sorry. And by the way, they're coming from a Hoosier. Oh, you must love the Pacers. I mean, I've gone to a couple games. Did I enjoy seeing them do well a little bit ago? Yeah, sure. But I don't watch every single game left, right, and center. No, I'm a college basketball guy. I get a lot of people like the Knicks. I've been hearing jokes about the poor Knicks fans for years. It's been sitcom fodder for ages. I hear you. I got you. But nitpicking about who does and doesn't get to be a Knicks fan is retarded. So here's Hakeem Jeffries doing that.
You're a big Knicks fan, obviously. President Trump is going to the game tonight. Your reaction to that?
So I've had a few things to say about Donald Trump going to the Knicks game. And, you know, at this point, it's game day. And I think Knicks fans just want to enjoy Game 3, the first home game that we've had in 27 years. But it also is not clear to me that Donald Trump is a big Knicks fan.
Don't do this.
I mean, does this guy even know the difference between Karl Rove and Karl Anthony Towns?
Okay, so this is obviously where we could point out, you know, very consistently, Trump has, in fact, been a Knicks fan. He's gone to a ton of big Knicks games. Again, why? How do we know this? Because a lot of the games, they panned to Trump, big, rich billionaire, famous person in the audience, because that's what a lot of major sports programming does. And not just with major sports programming, if there is anyone in that audience who is remotely famous, they will be shown on camera. I mean, good sweet Lord. During the Indiana University Miami games, they kept panning over to a porn star. And the cameraman kept getting in trouble because there was a young lady who does a lot of hoeing for a living, kept getting the camera. I mean, Donald Trump's been on the camera. Every famous person's been on the camera. Don't do this. Don't be stupid. Don't be stupid. Stephen A. Smith, sports broadcasters shouldn't be making these kind of mistakes. Why are we doing this? There's just no reason to get all high and mighty and freaking out over, I can't believe Trump is going to the game. Stop it.
It's strictly a basketball segment. This president has no business showing up in New York City.
Why? The man lived in New York for a long dang time. He was considered so much of an ornament of New York City that he was requested to be in Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, as the guy who would be the most likely celebrity to tell Kevin McAllister where the lobby of the freaking place is. Good sweet grace. Why? It's a basketball segment. Why would the president of the United States go to the NBA Finals? Oh no, a president is going to the championship of a sporting event. Oh, quick. Oh no, somebody quick, call the cops.
I am dead serious. It is selfish. It is narcissistic. It is ridiculous that he is coming to this game. I would say the same thing if it were Obama, George.
Oh, would you?
George W. Clinton. I don't give a damn. We went back to Reagan. This is not a football stadium.
I don't give a damn. I'm a little pansy wuss. A pansy wuss. And why do I say that? Here's Barack Obama. Here would be Barack Obama watching the Chicago Bulls take on the Cleveland Cavaliers. Obama had been to the finals. And Michelle playing some ball. There's fine. You're the leader of the free world. I'm sorry, the idea that it's somehow nepotistic for someone who is a mayor of a city or a governor or a senator or the president to get to go to a game. Yeah, you know what? There are perks when you get elected to fancy positions. There are. I don't care. No one actually cares. It's such silliness. It is truly such nonsense. And even that NBA commissioner, my producer is telling me, Adam Silver is refuting the accusation. He's a fixture at the NBA at Madison Square Garden. Back in the old days, he had courtside seats. Why must you people, you very good fine people out there, make me go to, of all people, Whoopi bleeping Goldberg on The View for sane takes here? In what wild, bizarro world? In what alternate Marvel Universe timeline is Stephen A. Smith, the pansy, and Whoopi Goldberg on point?
I'm sorry. Trump and Mayor Mamdani are Knicks fans and have been. They're New Yorkers. And you can't, there's nothing either one of them can do to change what's happening in the city for this team. They can't, they're there. Okay, there's a lot
jinx us?
There's a lot
No.
You know what? I don't think anything can jinx anything.
All right, I don't care about that crap. She's right to a degree. Now, again, I know there are a lot of people who are like, well, I've never seen Mamdani say he was a Knicks fan until like the last couple of months ago. Sure, yeah. And there are a lot of bandwagoners, sure. Has Mamdani leveraged being a fan of the local team in order to boost his popularity? Yes. But the fact of the matter is, yes, I know that Mamdani was born somewhere totally else. I know, I agree with you. The man's been in New York since 98. I mean, again, guys, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. I'm gonna let you in on just a quick secret. I know absolutely bleep all about IndyCar. I'm a Hoosier. My national brand is being like the common sense Midwesterner Hoosier. I am. Fox News invited me the day before the big race on Saturday to come down to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and do a segment from down there for Fox and Friends Saturday morning. Again, now, did you see me like strutting around going, oh, I'm a huge IndyCar fan. Oh, this is so great. Nope. But here's the secret. You're from the area. Yeah, you're allowed to rep the Knicks. I don't care. There's a lot of stuff to go after Mamdani for. This ain't it. There's a lot of things to go after Trump for. This definitely ain't it. Why do you care about that so much? Because people annoy me about how obsessive people get over who's allowed and who isn't allowed to be a fan of a team. And I say that as a fan of Indiana University football before it ever had a chance. And not just saying that because, I happened to grow up at church with the guy who was the coach of the team before Coach Sig. Coach Tommy Allen, who nobody liked, who was a wonderful man. And for the record, if you could keep his family, the Allen family, in your prayers, his father just passed away. And a wonderful, wonderful man was his father, Tom Allen. So as far as excellent families and teams and being a fan of university teams or professional teams back when no one liked them, can we not, for just like a hot second, the nonsense that consistently goes on? Because I did get a couple of questions from you guys about what our thoughts are on that kind of stuff. We'll have to cover some of the media meltdowns. Scott Pelley, Kristen Welker, they're just having the worst time of their lives because President Trump didn't want to be grimaced and yelled at by Kristen Welker after sitting in a rainy barn in Wisconsin forever, which to me I just find hilarious. I just do. I'm not as upset. Also, there's some Middle Eastern stuff that we'll have to cover tomorrow. To round out tonight, I did mention on the same night that we do the Tim Scott interview that there are quite a few of these Medicaid frauds going on around the country. And I wanted to list them to you here real quick, not as a cop-out, but just because I would really hate myself if I didn't give you guys these here at the very end here. According to, this is a June 2nd report, from 2021 to 2025, Hawaii's Medicaid funding went up 27%, their Medicaid enrollment went up 40%, and they did not produce a single conviction or obtain a single indictment of an individual in fraud. So, of course, the fraud task force is taking a look at that. A clinic owner in the Eastern District of New York has been convicted of $52 million of healthcare fraud. A Medicaid fraud probe found 94 companies at one address and a janitor billing $650,000 a month. And that's according to the investigative journalist Luke Rosiak on some other cases regarding Ohio, Minnesota, Nevada, West Virginia, all kinds of fraud. When I tell you guys from this desk that the number of cases that the Trump administration is investigating and prosecuting is not getting nearly enough coverage, I'm dead serious with you. This administration has actually put forward Biden's border task force. Kamala Harris, the border czar, did nothing. The Trump administration's task force against fraud is not getting a ton of national media attention, but the numbers themselves, any single one of these particular these fraud cases would have been the centerpiece of an entire 2-week news cycle just over a decade ago. And now they are just as run-of-the-mill as the stabbing attacks, as the scandals coming out about Democrat candidates, and as the pearl clutching over the Trump administration's blockade over the Strait of Hormuz, or over Israel and the Jews, or the nonsense surrounding ballot initiatives that are allowing individuals in Los Angeles to get a little freaky with the ballot count. And though we here at the Tony Kinnett Cast don't always do probably as good of a job as we should at covering some of these instances, I wanted to make sure that for today's show, even though it may not have been the greatest clickbait pull you in style headline, yes, 22% of the federal benefit dollars in this country from state to state are fraudulent. And that is a significant concern to the American people. Now, as a last little bit here, thanks to Rebecca Downs over at the Daily Signal for sending this my way. The Decision Desk headquarters is now projecting that Steve Hilton, the Republican, or one of the two Republican candidates, will win the second of the two spots in the California gubernatorial top 2 open jungle primary. So you have Becerra, the former Health and Human Services Secretary under Biden. That's nope. Big yikes. And by the way, I think he's going to win. I hate to say that to Steve. I don't see it. I would love to be wrong. Do I think that Steve Hilton would make a phenomenal governor? Absolutely. We'll have to see how that election turns out. But the Decision Desk is calling that for him. So we'll bring you more tomorrow on the Tony Kinnett Cast here, 7 p.m. Eastern, for another day of exciting primary coverage. Ooh, it'll be an excitement. Before we do head out, I do want to encourage you to check out our friends over at the Alliance Defending Freedom, because, hey man, it's the 250th year of our great republic. America has been a bastion of freedom for each one of those 250 years. And as we look ahead to the next 250, we're reminded that freedom is ours to defend. Today, the Alliance Defending Freedom, a proud sponsor of the show, and we're proud to have them, not only because I'm ridiculously picky, not only because I've worked with them before, not only because the ADF has stood behind teachers and counselors whose stories I've worked with directly, but the Alliance Defending Freedom is standing in courtrooms across the country to protect those freedoms that we cherish, specifically named, unlike, when Jennifer Welch talks about freedoms, life, the right to life, free speech, the First Amendment, religious freedom, and parental rights in and out of the classroom. These freedoms are at the core of who we are as a nation, and they must be preserved. ADF is approaching a critical fiscal year-end fundraising deadline. Your support today helps the Alliance Defending Freedom defend these freedoms so that they may endure for years to come. Again, cannot think of a more important facet of legal defense, especially when federal judges galore are spending all of their time and then some to, again, unfortunately keep those particular freedoms from Americans. So every dollar that you give will be doubled thanks to a special matching grant while funds last. Visit joinadf.com/Tony. And I'm seeing that, there we go, get that on the screen. Joinadf.com/Tony or text Tony, Tony, to 83848 to give today. That's joinadf.com/Tony or text Tony, Tony, to 83848. Really, really appreciate their sponsorship of the show. So that said, one last small announcement before the end of the show here. We will be doing the announcement of the giveaway winners, the merch giveaway winners for the Tony Kinnett cast here at the very tail end of things. That will be this Friday when we'll be announcing the winners of that merchandise giveaway. So if you go to tonykinnett.com and then there's a little merchandise giveaway tab, you can enter to win that. You'll get a couple of merch things. We're working on getting some of the bugs on that merch store worked out. So maybe you'll get a sticker. Maybe you'll get a mug. Who knows? Maybe we'll get a couple of mugs and some merch. I don't know, man. We'll see. A lot of you have given very kindly over the last couple of weeks, so maybe we'll have to work some of that stuff in. I think there was a very kind super chat tonight also by Mark and Jennifer Shelton. $5 super chat said, an Amazon driver, an American, was on a waiting list for 8 months because of a special visa program. I do not doubt it at all. So we've got a lot more to cover tomorrow. Again, we'll cover some information regarding the international front. Obviously, a lot of primary information, tons to cover. Don't go anywhere at 7 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. This has been the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.